Hey everyone, I'm rather incoherent, and I just want to make a brief video discussing a couple of house rules that we use at my table. I've already made a video like this in the past, but house rules that we use change over time, and some of ours have. As a clear example of that, in the previous video I have a house rule for Delve Too Deep that my group has long since stopped using. Our current house rule for Delve Too Deep is very simple. Delve Too Deep is banned. The game simply isn't balanced around gaining one extra victory every single scenario. And this can give you 2 extra victory every single scenario. It's completely reasonable to expect going into scenario 7, which is probably when you'll be cutting Delve Too Deep at the latest. That's when my group tends to do it. Some people cut it before then. But going into scenario 5 even, let's say you've got 2 and 3 scenarios, 1 and 2 scenarios, and you're cutting it at the end of scenario 5. So in scenario 6, you've gotten 8 experience. That's a massive amount of experience. Across a 4-player group, it's even worse. But that's just an entire scenario or more of experience depending on the campaign and how well it's going. If you find that you're doing disproportionately better in later scenarios and you're playing with Delve Too Deep, it is a not insignificant part of why. And to some degree, doing better isn't fun. I think that stronger characters make the game less interesting by being as strong as they are. And Delve Too Deep is just that. It's not fun to play with, and it contributes towards the last parts of a scenario, or a campaign rather, being less fun. So we've simply banned it outright. You can make a similar argument that cards like Karen's Obol aren't balanced, but since they're permanents, Karen's Obol, Arcane Research, those types of cards, they feel like they're more designed around. Card pools in Rogue and Mystic feel more expensive because it feels like they were created with this in mind. So we don't actually ban other meta-scaling things that give you victory because they don't feel like they were, I don't mean to be rude, but as haphazardly designed. Delve Too Deep doesn't feel like its ramifications were thought out, and it feels like an explicitly overpowered card that will never be in a good spot balance-wise. That said, we do have a house rule involving Karen's Obol. It just affects a lot of other cards too. That asterisk means that Karen's Obol is unique. And to some degree, I still do this on the channel, I follow unique rules as written, but when playing with a group of people on a tabletop, it's not as much a fun puzzle to see who gets what uniques as it is just a hassle that impedes us from enjoying the game. If somebody wants to play Leo, they don't want to ask everyone else, like, hey, are you playing a rogue? Because I want Leo and Karen's Obol. And if you already take those things, I might want to consider a different fighter than Leo Anderson. That discussion was like a fun, interesting part of game balance at first. But at this point, we just want to play the game. We don't want to sit down at the table and find out that somebody else also brought whatever random unique ally we're running, and now we have to change our plans. You might show up as Diana Stanley to a game with a blue fighter and find out you both want Brother Xavier, and figuring out who gets it isn't fun and isn't changing game balance very much. It's just a hassle that we don't want to deal with anymore. We still appreciate unique rules when it comes to our own decks, though. We don't care at all about what's on other people's boards, but you cannot have 2 Dr. Milans or whatever on your own board. We think it's still very clearly relevant or that sort of thing. Just for dealing with other players, it doesn't affect game balance very much. It makes the game way smoother to ignore it. And there's like a slight clause to this. You're not allowed to use things like Black Market to give your second Milan to your teammates. That's obviously against the rules. And the last house rule that we're going to be discussing today is about weaknesses. I think pretty much every tabletop group has some house rule for weaknesses. I'd love to hear what other people's are. But for our group, the one that we settled on like immediately, like going into our first session of Dunwich, was you just pull 3 random weaknesses and then you pick one of them. And the reason for that's straightforward. Maybe as a player, you particularly hate Obsessive. I do. Or maybe there are certain weaknesses, there's none here, but something like Amnesia or Paranoid that would just ruin the concept of your big hand or big money decks. So this helps you as a player not pull something that ruins the game for you, and as a character in the game, not have your entire game plan ruined by a random weakness. Neither of those things are any fun, and this just avoids that. It does also tilt the game in our favor a little bit, but it's just a concession we're willing to make the game tremendously more enjoyable for us. So far, when we've gotten random weaknesses during campaigns, we've just pulled 1 weakness and taken what we've gotten. I think the only reason that has stood so long is because no one's ever been playing big money and hit Paranoid or something equivalent to that. And the moment that happens, we'll have a new house rule where it's like, if you pick a random weakness and you'd rather take Overzealous, you can take Overzealous. Because at that point, you probably shouldn't just have your entire deck ruined by your weakness. But I think this is a nice compromise. If we want to make it harder on ourselves, and since we probably do, what I might propose to my group is switching it down to only picking from 2 random weaknesses, or picking from 3 and removing one and then taking the other one randomly. One of those might be a good alternative to make it a little bit less favored for the players. But if you just take one weakness randomly, it's so high variance. Maybe you get Stubborn Detective. Maybe you get Doomed. Speaking of house rule, things like Doomed are banned. Any card that does nothing until it literally kills your character, out of the game. It's not a fun weakness to interact with, and the point of the game is to have fun. So we give 3 mulligans on cards like Doomed, but I think that's about it for our weakness rules. I think I would prefer to just pick from 2. That makes it a bit harsher. When you have things like Paranoid, you don't get to look at Internal Injury and the other one, you just have to take what the other one is, because we all know you're not picking Paranoia if you're given a choice. So I think I'm going to propose to my group that we switch it down to only picking from 2, but I think most groups have some sort of house rule where you don't just pick a random weakness, because that can be so disproportionately brutal due to the random nature of it. And that's what we've been using. I would propose to make it a little bit harsher and go to pick from 2 as opposed to pick from 3. But I just want to make a short video today talking about the house rules that our group is still using in every single campaign we play. I guess a 4th rule. Technically, this is not a rule so much as a gentleman's agreement. Don't play Rex. Anyways, I've been Rather Coherent. Hope you enjoyed this incredibly brief video about house rules that we're using at my table, and I'll see you in the next one.